because I asked if I could have a drink during this panel, and they just brought me a bottle of Chardonnay. So, pretty sweet deal.
No, go ahead. No, you're totally fine. Like I said, it's pretty much whoever the guest is, it's just their brew. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
So go ahead and pour your wine.
Very exciting after I finish this bottle.
Okay, after the bottle of wine, if you just were like, okay, don't need that cup now, and then look, like that would be amazing.
I am a classy gal, guys. So I'm going to drink it out of this cup. Hey, let's get down to business.
What's business?
Yeah, whatever.
Want to be super formal? We can be super formal.
No.
Where did you grow up, and what kind of pushed you into the performing there?
Oh, okay. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, actually a little small town outside of Atlanta called Lilburn. It's such a southern sounding city, Lilburn, Georgia. And what pushed me into voice acting?
Well, acting in general.
Acting in general. So I was kind of a hammy kid. I was not like, obviously not like the popular kid, and I was like, how do I make friends? And so I realized that if I was a smart ass and I made jokes all the time, that people would be friends with me. And so that's how, and I'm sure a lot of you in here come from a similar background. So that's how I started kind of performing, was just like to make friends. And then I started doing shows in high school, and I was part of like the drama club, and then I got into doing improv, and then from improv I found voice acting, or voice acting kind of found me actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
With your improv background, have there been any like one-off stage characters that you would like to see developed further?
Oh my God, yes. So anybody that knows me from the stage knows that when I do improv shows, I almost 50% of the time play old man characters. I love old men characters. I just love them. They're my favorite to play. Particularly like old, like weird old like prospectors. Like, hey, you don't look like you're from around here. Like they're scary and maybe they're like ghosts. So I would love to develop that into a show, like just a scary old ghost prospector that lives in the mountains.
They can just throw that to you like for an episode on our show where you
I know, right?
your voice in there. That would be amazing.
I wish that it worked like that, where I was just like, guys, I got a great idea. They're like, Amber, get out of here.
How was the idea of Archer initially pitched to you?
Great question. So there was a show, I live in Atlanta, and in Atlanta is where Cartoon Network is headquartered, and they also make Adult Swim. And so there's lots of people that kind of get into doing voice work in Atlanta because Georgia, this is very technical, but Georgia is a right-to-work state, so they're headquartered there so they don't have to pay actors very much money. Just a little side note. So I was doing a show called Frisky Dingo. Yes! Thank you. It's such a weird show. So they had made C-Lab before that. The same people, and then after making C-Lab, they made Frisky Dingo, and I got the role of Valerie just because they needed somebody, and they could call me and I'd show up and they'd pay me basically in wine, or like checks that I'd take to like the check cashing place. Like I didn't have an agent, I didn't have a union or anything. And so I did 2 seasons of Frisky Dingo, and then I got canceled because the show didn't make any sense. Sorry. And I was there at the studio, which at this time was just like 6 dudes in like a dirty house in East Atlanta making cartoons, and they would lock you in a closet that was just like halfway covered with like dirty quilts. And that's where you would literally get locked in there. Thankfully, I didn't have anxiety problems like I do now, back then. So they asked me to come in. It had been canceled, but they were making stuff for this 2nd season DVD, and they wanted like to do some extras and stuff. So while I was there recording, they're like, hey, we want you to see something. And there was a monitor with Pam's head on it, and they had one of Val's lines coming out of Pam's head, just to kind of see what the character would look like with my voice. And they're like, hey, we're doing this thing, do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I was just a gigging actor. I was like, oh, this is another like shit job that they're going to give me, and it's going to last for 2 years. And so I didn't have to audition for it. And then I found out later that there was like a bunch of famous people already cast on the show, and they just gave me the job. It's crazy, it's crazy. So the one thing that did happen is, and I didn't know this back then, but just about every show, whenever they cast actors, there has to be like network approval. So the network had to say yes or no based on what they saw in the first episode, and luckily they liked my character. And I think too, they didn't think it was going to become very much of a big character. Like she was just always going to be like a pretty side character, and luckily, you know, she kind of developed into the character she is today.
She super did.
Yeah. Archer's best friend. How sweet. It's true.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
over the past decade-ish, just shy of a decade, right?
Yeah.
We've seen a real transition and turn from who Pam was in the pilot.
Yes.
What has been your favorite version of Pam?
Oh my God, there's so many.
And what else would you like to see revealed?
Okay. So the crazy thing is just recently I went back and reread the pilot script, and the first time that they introduced Pam as a character, they say Pam, the mousy director of HR. And it's so funny because that's so far from the truth today, but that's what they thought the character was going to be. They just needed like a punching bag, right? They needed somebody to and now that's Cyril. So they just needed somebody to be the butt of all the jokes. And so sorry, what was the second part of the question?
What else would you like to see?
Oh, right. But was there another part?
Yeah, what's your favorite iteration of Pam?
Right.
Is it Fight Club Pam, or is
Yeah,
it...
great, okay. So I think that the character developed into such a cool character, which is awesome, because Pam can do just about anything now. And I think it's because they needed people to do something. Like, we need a drift car driver. Okay, we'll have Pam do it. We need somebody that can do street art. Okay, have Pam do it. We need somebody to sleep with a bunch of crazy Yakuza gangsters. Okay, Pam can do it. And then it was oh shit, now she's a super crazy awesome character. So I think that my favorite, I really loved Archer Vice. Because it was a very Pam-centric season, so that was super fun. And I remember Adam Reed, who's the creator, told me, he was like, hey, so Pam's going to be addicted to cocaine this whole season. And I was like, yeah, awesome. And then I was like, if she's addicted to cocaine, then maybe she would be thinner. And he was like, huh, let me think about it. And then a couple weeks later, I went to the studio because I was picking something up, and I saw an animator working on a frame of Pam, and she was skinny but still had giant boobs. And I was like, yes, it's so cool. But then a lot of people were really upset because they were like, we miss big Pam, bring her back. And I agreed. I was like, it was fun for a little while, but it's fun to have her back. And then season 8 was really fun too because I was gender neutral, so that was cool. I had a bunch of grandchildren with a bunch of Chinese slaves. Very strange. But honestly, I think it's going to be this new season because do you guys know what the 9th season is supposed to be? Have you heard about it? So they announced it at San Diego Comicon, so I can talk about it. So season 9 is going to be Danger Island, and Archer is basically a pilot in the South Pacific in the 1930s, and Pam is his co-pilot / mechanic, and apparently she's giant. She's Chewbacca sized. Yeah, so she looks just the same. She's back to totally being female, and she's got her big boobs back, but she's 7 feet tall. And they sent me a mock-up just because they were excited to show me of her standing next to Cyril, and she dwarfs him. It's so funny. Yeah, so that's really exciting. I can't wait for people to see it.
Hi. He was good enough to ask what your favorite iteration of Pam is up until now. What would you like to see them do with Pam moving forward, other than the 7-foot Chewbacca?
I kept pitching this idea to Adam Reed, and I was like, look, we need to do a show that's all about poopy farms, and see Pam's whole family, and I get to play all the voices like Nutty Professor. And so, he hasn't bitten yet, so we'll see. It may never happen, or at least an episode. I was like, come on, it'd be so fun. So who knows what'll happen. We're gonna take a picture with all the Archer cosplayers on stage, but before that, if anybody wants an autograph, I'll be at my autograph table for 1 more hour after this, so come see it. So everybody that is an Archer cosplay, please come up on stage, and we're gonna take a big group photo together.
A lot more than I thought. I just saw the names. I didn't know.
Well, Sky is Archer, and Jeff is Krieger.
Supervisor!